everybody, welcome back to Great Northwest Weaponry. This is Thomas, and today we're taking a look at a really interesting piece. This is the FB Radom Vis 35. This is something that I have been super interested in getting in my collection for quite a while, and I finally did here just recently. You may recall we did a first shots short with this just like maybe a month ago at the time of posting this. This is the third variation of the gun. We'll get into the different variations as we go forward. We may actually get to go over to the Warfront for the tabletop segment to take a look at the differences between the multiple variations. We'll see how that pans out. That's the plan, at least. There's a lot of interesting history behind these. It's kind of a Browning clone almost. Somewhere between a high power and a 1911, but in 9mm and made in Poland originally for the Wehrmacht. So, really fascinating piece. Let's, before we get too far into it here, go ahead into the gun room and talk Radom history. As we'd already alluded to, the Radom Vis 35 is a gun that was inspired by the high power John Moses Browning design. If you're not aware of it, then you live under a rock. It does, in appearance, seem a lot closer to the 1911, and I've actually read that it is so alike to the 1911 that there are a great many parts, namely like the slide, that are within just a millimeter or two of being interchangeable with the 1911. Though, again, it is actually the high power that inspired the design, and it is a 9mm. It was originally designed in Poland beginning in 1930 by a pair of dudes whose names I'm not even going to attempt to say. Piotr something and Jan something. They are extremely Polish names, and Polish is a language that I can't even come close to reading. It goes by a couple of different names. The original name it was actually a acronym for the names of the people who designed it, but it was changed to Vis, of which is Latin for, I believe, force. It is also known as the WZ-35, WZ being shorthand for visor or wizor. It's similar to with Czech guns, the VZ is visor. It's just the Polish version of that word. It means model. So WZ-35. The gun did enter production in 1935 and was adopted by the Polish army in 1936. But in, I believe, 1939, the German army invaded, and production of the gun never ceased. It continued all the way through the German occupation. The name also, with it being called Radom, it does say Radom on the slide, even on this example, and it even, you got the FB on the left grip and then Vis on the right grip, but FB is actually a acronym for the town, or the factory in which it was made, Fabrica Bruni, I believe it is, and Radom is the name of the town in which that factory is located. So in this example, with this being the third variation, it was actually made at the Steyr factory. There are three primary variations. A lot of people put the first variation as being examples that have a, knocked over my holster here, a notch cut in the back for a stock attachment. I've also seen people state that the first variation is simply the ones that were made for Poland. The second variation, they did away with that, but both the first and second variation have a piece that is missing on the third variation. They have a takedown lever. As such, taking down this example is a nightmare because you have to hold the gun open while prying it apart. I'll be showing how to do it with this when we go to the tabletop, but it is my intention, again, to go to the Warfront and take a look at their examples and actually show you takedown on either a first or second variation of the Vis 35. When the Russians kicked the Germans back out of Poland in, I believe, January of 45, actually, the factory plans were all moved to Steyr in Austria, and the gun continued production there, and that is where this example came from. And I do have, again, a holster with this, and this is actually the original holster. We've got markings inside the lid that You're not going to be able to see them here for sure, but we'll try and take a closer look at them when we go to the tabletop. But this is a really nice condition original holster for this thing. It's a very robust design. I mean, it's based on a Browning, and John Moses Browning made some of the best gun designs of all time. I've both read and been told that they actually got around Browning's patent with this decocker feature here. So just to show clear real quick, the gun is quite empty. Nothing in there. So decock it, and you will notice not a double action. It simply drops the hammer. It does not actually convert it to a double action as most decockers do. And I, again, have both read and been told that that is how they got away from Browning's patents for both the 1911 and the high power, because there are a lot of similarities between both. They even borrowed the 1911's grip safety. Again, at a glance, like, you know, grab my my Colt over here that I just got. They are extremely similar designs at a glance, but there are a great many differences between the two. Production continued all the way until Austria was invaded. They did not stop pumping these things out of the door until the moment that the Third Reich fell. So the majority of them were made for Germany. I believe it's in the 300,000 range that were made for Germany. I could be incorrect on that, but that's the number that's jumping out to me in my mind. The vast majority of them are Wehrmacht examples. It, if I'm not mistaken, was the third most common imported firearm in Germany. A couple of the other notable ones are actually behind me over here. The speaking of Browning, the FN Browning Model 1922 and the CZ Model 1927 would be a couple of your other more common German import pistols. But the Vis, from my understanding, was the third most common. Just a really cool piece. It's one that, again, I've wanted one of these forever, so getting this in my collection finally was kind of a bucket list item. As was the 1911. This one, I'm really excited about this. But anyway, let's go ahead and transition to tabletop. And this one's going to be a little different because we're going over to my friends at the War Front to take a look at the various different variations of the Radom Vis. Okay, guys, we are at the War Front, and we have got quite a lineup of Radoms to look at here, courtesy of my friends Lawrence and Drew. Speaking of which, first one seen here, this is the earliest example, belongs to Drew. This here, probably 1943 example, give or take, belongs to Lawrence. This later example belongs to the store, and you can see the machining on this one is rough, as is on mine. The grips are a little paler brown on this one versus mine. I'm not 100% certain which of these is older, and it can be hard to tell, but both of these seem to fall in the range of guns that were assembled in the Steyr factory, barrels manufactured at Steyr. The one you see on the left here is the earliest example for sure. All of these are German occupation examples, but this first example here, you can see very clearly stamped the P35. That was one of the German names for it, and then the P in parentheses for Poland. And this one is one of the slotted back examples. So this is early. This is probably from 1940, give or take. I would say early 1940, honestly. Then Lawrence's example, no slotted back here, and no clearly marked P35 as on this other example, though there does appear to be, and I don't know if you can see that at the tip of my finger there, very, very faint P35 stamp. These examples both would have been 100% manufactured in Poland, and we're actually going to be using Lawrence's example for disassembly when we get to that. And then mine and this other one, again, at least assembled at the Steyr factory. The really late ones that were fully built at the Steyr factory would typically have wooden slotted grips. And that's a lot of times going to be how you're going to tell them apart. So it would have the wooden grips and the lack of a takedown lever. So you see both Drew's and Lawrence's examples, the early and mid-war ones respectively, have the takedown lever. Now, I'm going to clear out these two examples for the moment. I've got holsters for mine and Lawrence's. So my holster, and you can probably not see this, but it is BNZ 1944 stamped, BNZ being Steyr. Steyr did make holsters pretty prolifically, and you will see some of these guns where the whole FB Radom Vis legend is absent, and it will have B and Z marked on the side of it. Those examples, the slide was made at the Steyr factory. A lot of them that were made at the Steyr factory were a kind of a hodgepodge of leftover parts and whatever else they could find, and whatever they couldn't find they would make. So you'll see somewhere it might be a early slide, or early slide with a late frame, like this is a late frame, late slide example, and this again is mid-war all the way through. But then you might find some that are super rough machining with a big old BNZ stamp instead of the FB Radom stamps, and wooden grips. That would be a, like, you know, February or later of 1945 example. This was probably the last few months of 44, just before production was moved to Steyr in its entirety. And we didn't really go over the why of the moving of first parts of production, then full production to Steyr. A lot of Vis 35 pistols went missing and then were later found in the hands of Polish resistance fighters. So to discourage the hemorrhaging of complete guns to Polish resistance fighters, they stopped making the barrels at the Radom factory. But again, so this is a later holster. The earlier holster, this is Lawrence's example, has this nifty pull string, and we're not going to use it with the gun in the holster, but the idea is it would sit right against there or there, and as you pull on the string, it would pull the gun out of the holster and make it a little easier to extract the gun in case of it getting more or less stuck. Now, we are using Lawrence's example for disassembly. Somewhere in the middle here, I will show you why that is going to be so much easier with Lawrence's than with mine, or with the other late example that we've got off screen to the right. So first off, show clear, mag, empty, gun, empty. Now, decock that. This is your takedown lever. You see there is a piece right at the tip of my fingernail there that sticks up a little bit. That goes into that notch there. So pull the slide back and lock it thusly. Now we are going to pull on this piece on your guide rod and pop this out while applying pressure here. So to pop this out, I'm going to flip the gun over this way and just push on that, and it should just fall free. Bada boom. Now release your takedown lever, and the slide and barrel and recoil spring assembly should all come free. Now we rotate this piece of the recoil spring and guide rod, and it comes free. Now, so you push it to about here and then lift up. There's a spot where it comes free. Lift out, and there you are. Gun fully disassembled. Before we put this back together, the reason this is so much more difficult with my example is there is no lock. So instead of locking it, you have to hold it right there while pulling this out, while popping that out all at the same time. You need a third hand.
Now, reassembly. Start by putting the barrel back in. Just guide it into place, and it should line up. Recoil spring and guide rod. I'm going to put it in with this facing upward and then rotate it into place. Now, putting this back on the frame. Just line up in the tracks, guide all the way on, pull back and lock with, again, your takedown lever. Now this part, we're going to pull on this again and kind of drop this in. Yeah. It's kind of a pain. There we go. Now it should all be together. Bada boom. Now, we're going to take mine back out to the range and put a mag through it and show you guys how that works. It's pretty straightforward. Again, the full lineup here. This is just so very much Radom. So very cool. I'd like to thank Lawrence Drew at the Warfront for letting me do this segment here. And here we go, back to the range. Loading this gun is dead simple. You've got your 8-round 9mm mag, and you should be able to just put it in and give it a whack, but there's this notch right here, and when the mag is loaded, it can be kind of firm. I did manage it right there, but if you do find that it is too firm to just slam it in, when you get to here, you can just depress your magazine release and slide it the rest of the way and just make sure it's fully seated. Now, this gun does have a weird feature that we've talked about, the decocker. So when loaded, right now we're loaded and ready to fire. And I'm gonna make sure I'm pointed in a safe direction here. There's nothing off screen over here. I'm pointed at a hill, but decock it, and what it does is it just pulls the firing pin out of the way and drops the hammer. But as you can see here, it does not switch it to double action like most of the German guns of the era, such as the P38 and Walther PP, where when you decock it, it switches it to double action. So to fire, when you decock this, simply pull your hammer back. Now it should be ready to go. Let's see if we can improve the accuracy a bit here on this magazine. It does seem to hit high left, so I gotta aim low right a bit. Failure to eject. There we go. I think 2 more shots. There we go. Well, accuracy did in fact improve from the first mag to the second mag. Very interesting piece, one that I'm super happy to have in my collection. We'll definitely be putting this head-to-head with other Nazi 9mm, namely the Walther P38, but also down the road, my buddy Dylan, when we get out and make some videos with him, has a Astra 600 model 1943 that was made in Spain for the Wehrmacht. It's also a 9mm. Sorry, getting kind of mush mouth. It's really cold out here right now. But that would be an interesting one to put this head-to-head with, another German import firearm. Maybe as well as the Luger at some point down the road. And probably some of the the Browning designs. I'll have to put this up against my 1911 for sure. But anyway, hope you all enjoyed the video. It's been Thomas with Great Northwest Weaponry. We'll see you all next time.